Well, welcome back to West End Recovery Live. Joining us today, we have Darren Miller, co-founder of the Black Business Institute, who will be giving us an insight into the work that they do. That work includes promoting a fairer society through diversity and inclusion. Darren will be giving us an overview of their current projects and discuss how West End businesses can support their work. We'll also be joined by Luciana Magliocco, Associate Director Marketing at New West End Company. She'll be providing an overview of the pop-up programme that New West End Company has recently launched in partnership with Westminster City Council and the Crown Estate. The programme is designed to entice exciting, diverse and original brands to the nation's high street. It also aims to offer prime retail space to small-scale businesses, homegrown startups and innovative brands. There will be an opportunity, as always, to ask our speakers questions, so please enter any questions you have into the chat box that's on your screen now. Lots to get through this afternoon, so let's get started with a New West End Company's Chief Executive, Jace Tyrrell, for an update. Jace, over to you.
Martin, thank you very much indeed, and good afternoon to all of our West Enders, members and partners. I have to say it's such a joy being in the office this week and seeing customers back, but also a lot of our members. It's terrific of actually meeting in person, that novelty. So it's great to see you, and hopefully lots more of you in the weeks and months ahead. I have to say the numbers have come back the last couple of months since we've reopened, and actually footfall was around 50%. Which is good to see, given we haven't got the full return of officers yet, and we haven't obviously got the international tourists, but actually customers are spending, and we saw in last month's sales figures at PwC around 70% back on 2019 levels. So obviously good news, we're turning a corner, a long way to go, and huge focus for us over this year and going into next year of getting our customers back, obviously, and spending in the West End, which I'm sure we'll touch on later on today in the webinar. In terms of New West End Company, a couple of updates our side as we get into hopefully full and irreversible unlock on the 19th of July, the terminus date, according to our Prime Minister. There is a whole host of programs happening through the summer, into autumn, into Christmas, to really entice our customers back into the West End. And our services, cleaning, security, our inside services, all available to the members of New West End Company to support you as we get into full reopening and customers starting returning in the period ahead. We're very mindful of some of the disruption we've seen from a lot of protest activity happening, particularly down Oxford Street and Regent Street. It seems to be every Saturday we're managing lots and lots of protests. And myself with our Chief Operating Officer, Dee Coursey, we're off to see Cressida Dick next week, the Met Commissioner, to raise this point that actually we need to think about these protests and think about the impact it has both economically and operationally to the districts. We'll of course keep you updated on that, but wanted to reassure you it's top of our list, and we want to see if we can get a better route and not necessarily through the commercial heart of the West End with this activity. We're pushing away on the Elizabeth line. We hope by Q4 this fiscal year, not next fiscal year, we'll see the full opening of the Elizabeth line. And Oxford Street District, I hope colleagues would have seen the plans for Oxford Circus from Westminster City Council that were launched last week. An incredible new piazza. Hopefully we'll see through later this year, and it's all part of the 150 million at least that's going to be invested end-to-end centre point to Marble Arch and the wider district over the years ahead. And final plug from our Insights colleagues, we have restarted the programme. There's incredibly rich data there on what's happening with our customers and forward demand. So please sign up if you haven't already, and we'll continue to provide you with that qualitative and quantitative insight from our customers as they start to return. So as Martin said, lots going on, lots of updates, but today it's an absolute privilege to have Darren join us. This month is Pride Month, and when we think about Pride, we think about diversity and inclusivity and our social impact that all of us have a responsibility for in the West End, whether we're a property owner, a retailer, hotelier, and us also at New West End Company. And I came across Darren through a link with the Crown Estate, our partners, and it's utterly remarkable what they're doing at BBI, which I won't steal his thunder, but there's such a brilliant opportunity for all of us to support BBI in the future. So a real privilege that Darren's found the time to join us today. And I think I will stop there and hand over to Darren. Thank you.
Thanks, Jace. It's lovely to be here, an opportunity to talk about the work that BBI is undertaking. And I'll start with some background information about BBI. In fact, BBI came about in summer of last year, really in response to the very sad and brutal killing of George Floyd, and a conversation between myself and the person that would become the co-founder of BBI, Magnus Hansen, really talking about what we could do. Very topical at the time. A conversation that could have lasted for 5 or 10 minutes went on for 4 hours, and at the end of those 4 hours, clearly we had a shared passion, but similar values and some ideas around how business could make all the difference. In short, we believe that entrepreneurialism leads to social mobility, and social mobility is a key component for the levelling of society. We see that diversity and inclusion is a societal-wide responsibility to try and fix some of those social ills. And at the moment, there's almost a belief that it's down to the Black community to fix this problem. But and we say at BBI, not at all. It's for all members of society to do what they can to try and resolve these issues. Next slide, please. At BBI, to actually move the dial, we have a series of programs, initiatives, and are looking to form partnerships so that we can really drive transformational change. Next slide, please. We know that in the Black community, because of resource issues, very often organisations tend to be on the smaller side. For that reason, often working in silos and duplicating effort. So we knew there was a job of coordination to be done at BBI in order to deliver maximum social justice. Next slide, please. Right from the very beginning, we recognised the need to have a really powerful advisory board, and to a large extent we've managed to achieve that, attracting wonderful, talented individuals at the top of their game who can impact on D&I strategies at boardroom level. That's really been responsible for much of the wonderful momentum that BBI has experienced. Legally, we're working with an international law firm, CMS, I believe one of the top 10 in the world, and they've taken forward our application for charitable status. And so we expect to have full charitable status quite soon. And now we're turning our attention to really the nub of the issue, which is around access to capital. In fact, access to capital to fund businesses is really quite narrow, open to a fortunate few, often very well networked. And so we're calling for a shake-up. We're calling it inverted venture capital, a new approach. Next slide, please. And there's empirical evidence to support our approach. And there was a report that came out in association with the Financial Times in November of last year. And it was quite revealing. Of all the capital invested in businesses in the last 10 years, only 0.24% went to Black entrepreneurs. And during that time, that 10-year period, only one female managed to get Series A funding, which we say is pretty woeful. Next slide, please. In terms of advisors, our advisory board is led by Lord Michael Hastings of Scarisbrick. Lord Michael Hastings was formerly in charge of the BBC's public affairs. Prior, he was a global leader for KPMG. He's currently a trustee for Vodafone and the Chancellor of 2 universities. He's joined by Sajeev Chahil. Sajeev, a Silicon Valley icon, is formerly the Executive Vice President of Apple, in charge of all their global communication and partnerships. In that capacity, he put together some incredible partnerships, one with the filmmaking industry, Paramount Pictures, to support the making of the Mission Impossible films. He also led investment into an audio company, which many would have heard of, called Beats, making headphones and other audio equipment. Also joined by Sello Latang, a pivotal figure in South Africa's Truth Commission. For the last 13 years, he's been the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. And Magnus Dejaba, CEO of Publicis UK, the giant advertising company, and global president of Saatchi & Saatchi. That's just a snapshot, but on the BBI website, there's a full complement of advisors helping us on this journey. Next slide, please. When we talk about this subject, we speak to lots of companies and individuals, and we briefly touch upon history. From the 1480s is when slaving started in earnest, and it grew to an industrial scale by the time it was abolished in 1833 with the aid of people like William Wilberforce and Grenville Sharp. As part of that abolition process, the British government took out a loan. It was the largest loan in history until the 2008 crash, and it was for the equivalent of 300 billion. That money was used to compensate the slave owners. The slaves were not compensated. And to really underline how current these issues still are, that loan was only repaid in 2015. A lot of what we talk about at BBI is about the levelling of society, so all citizens can be judged equally on merit. They can become stakeholders and beneficiaries. Another interesting statistic is the last transatlantic slave died in 1971. And why this is all relevant is when it comes to the funding rounds. Next slide, please. There is a structure when it comes to raising money, and the very first funding round is called the pre-seed round, or the friends and family round. And as the name suggests, it's expected that the entrepreneur can raise that initial capital amongst their friendship and family group. The intended consequences of slavery and colonization is to deny those demographics of the ability to build intergenerational wealth. And so when it comes to having the capital to invest in a business, unfortunately, they've not had time to build up that capital. And that would certainly be the case for Sylvester McGee's family. Direct descendants of slaves wouldn't yet have had the chance to build up those cash surpluses to give them the confidence to speculate in business. Next slide, please. It's a massive barrier, and there are other barriers. It's well reported that the state education system failing numerous groups, one of the leading groups being black boys, and there's a direct correlation between poor education and the over representation of that demographic in the penal system, and the under representation of BME amongst the UK's highest earners. And there's also a relationship between earning and status and credit, which links into property ownership. And why property ownership is really important is because traditionally, for that second round of funding, seed capital, it's been the high street banks that entrepreneurs go to. And unless there's property in the background or another substantial asset, the bank won't lend much more than, say, £10,000 if you're very convincing. And that's hardly enough to start a meaningful business. So next slide, please. So at BBI, we are building an ecosystem. First of all, the focus is to find a way to make that initial capital available to facilitate the friends and family round of funding. But it's more than that. It's the mentorship, it's the wraparound support, the networking, and finding synergistic partnerships. Mentorship is actually very important because it can play a crucial role in providing knowledge where there's a knowledge gap. Next slide, please. We know that timing's really good for this subject, and lots of organisations have come forward to talk about the past and their potential role in slaving and colonisation. But our focus is really the future. Next slide, please. And D&I is now growing in importance and stature. People are starting to recognise the societal impact positive D&I can bring. And in fact, there's a growing kudos as well. The Financial Times now produces a ranked list of diversity and inclusion leaders, and names you might recognize is Booking.com, Hermes, Giorgio Armani, IKEA, Volvo, and many more. Next slide, please. My own background is my parents came to this country from Jamaica in the early 60s, and I was born in southeast London in Dulwich at a time when Dulwich wasn't posh, and went to an ordinary comprehensive school. And my parents were very proud to be, they considered the UK as the motherland, and they were proud and hardworking, diligent people who wanted to make a meaningful contribution to the UK. And that's still the case for many people coming from the Caribbean and other parts of the world. They really do see the UK as that motherland. Next slide, please. In terms of my career, I worked a lot in the luxury space, working with luxury brands such as American Express and Shurian, special events including Aston Martin, McLaren, Range Rover, and many more. My co-founder, Magnus Hansen, is quite a prolific early stage investor, invested in businesses, over 100 of them, including the likes of Skype, Monster Recruitment, and Spotify, to name a few. Next slide, please. So we're now actively speaking to companies who are ready to make a public statement about diversity and inclusion, and where possible, engaging those companies and encouraging them to sign up to the BBI Charter. The Charter is intentionally not overly onerous. It's a commitment to inclusion, gathering and publishing data, using D&I as a key performance indicator, and rejecting non-diverse shortlists so there's a more diverse workforce. We're engaged with a number of companies such as Vodafone, Bauer Media, very early conversation with the Crown Estate about signing up to the Charter. The process is there's a brief audit with an independent company, and companies that are willing to sign up to the Charter, we engage in a plan, and then we issue once it's approved, we issue the BBI Butterfly Kite Mark. Next slide, please. The Charter itself was put together with Stephen Frost, CEO of Frost Included, one of the recognised leaders in diversity and inclusion. Wonderful clients such as Harvard University, World Economic Forum, AstraZeneca, to name a few. Next slide, please. So where we are and now as an organisation, when we first started, this chart was completely white. But as we roll forward, we find partners to support our numerous initiatives, whether it's the educational initiative, where Magnus has a relationship with the owner of H&M, or whether it's the entrepreneurial initiative, which we'll be announcing soon, or the relationship with the Financial Times for our podcast series, which I'll share details with in a moment. We have wonderful alliedship with these incredible companies, leaders in their various verticals. Next slide, please. I spoke about the past, but even if people don't understand how a practice which seemingly came into an end over 100 years ago, how it's still pertinent today, there's current data which proves a cognitively diverse team made up of different genders, different racial groups, much better for problem solving and for driving innovation, and according to McKinsey Consulting, also more profitable. Next slide, please. And so the role of BBI is really to do what we can to remove these systemic and structural barriers. And according to the government, there's a bonus. At least 24 billion would flow into the economy if these barriers didn't exist. Next slide, please. And so in many respects, it's about challenging these preconceived ideas that say, if you're from a certain background, there are limitations placed on you in terms of expectations about what it's possible for you to achieve. And we say, if there's a level playing field, it's possible to be a filmmaker like Steve McQueen or Gisela Abham, chair of the British Science Association, Sharon White, chairman of the John Lewis Partnership, or of course, Sir Lewis Hamilton. And why Sir Lewis Hamilton is such an important case study, he proves the point that diversity and inclusion, instead of being some sort of hindrance, is quite the opposite. Next slide, please. Had McLaren initially not had an open diversity and inclusion policy followed by Mercedes, Mercedes would not have had the benefit of Lewis Hamilton's talent, and they can now claim construction champion 7 years on the trot, profit up £14 million, and because Lewis Hamilton has always been spoken about as one of the leading people in F1, they have a hugely disproportionately high amount of TV coverage, and that has a value of close to half a billion. Next slide, please. And so from our perspective, migration is natural, it's constant. People are, since the beginning of time, people are constantly moving in order to seek a better life. And a country flourishes when all of those different racial groups can be seamlessly integrated to create one nation. The UK, because of its history, has access to wonderful global talent, and at BBI, that's one of our core messages, is let's not waste the talent. Let's use all of that wonderful human resource that we have in the UK. Next slide, please. So we have a number of different initiatives which are designed to actually drive transformative change in a really measurable and practical way. Next slide, please. One of our initiatives is Pathways, working with esoteric industries where there's traditionally very low representation of Black and other minority groups. We are engineering strategies whereby we can open up a conduit into these industries. And one of our first partnerships is with Saatchi & Saatchi. There's a course where individuals can actually be trained up for 12 months. And once they finish that training, Saatchi & Saatchi have 16 vacancies available for successful individuals to slot into. So that's real transformative change and a real opportunity to change lives. Next slide, please. We also have another initiative, an educational initiative called BBI Project 100. And in this instance, we're working with corporate partners. The corporate partner is the owner of H&M in the first instance. And there's a match funding initiative. Next slide, please. In short, we're in the process of finding 100 schools who are willing to sign up to this process, whereby we pay for a child through our corporate partnership to go into the school, and then the school, as part and parcel of the relationship, makes available a full non-conditional bursary, doubling the numbers. They also sign up to the BBI Educational Charter, which means they prioritise child welfare and pastoral care. Next slide, please. The aim is to find companies, institutions, individuals who are willing to invest in the future by paying for more and more children to access leading education through these private schools. We're obviously not against the public sector, but there's very little that BBI can do about the public sector. It's obviously controlled by the government. It's we don't have the ability to impact on the government at this stage, but we do have the ability to work with private schools and widen access to leading education. Next slide, please. We will be taking out a prolific campaign, so any of the schools or corporates that engage in this campaign will get the marketing benefit, and we think that's very important. Next slide, please. We also have are about to launch our podcast series, which is called You're on Mute. Our partner is the Financial Times, and the Financial Times How to Spend It. And in short, working with companies that have at least certainly a national footprint, if not a global one, we're finding companies that are prepared to use that power, that influence, that reach as a force for good. Next slide, please. The podcast series itself is divided into 3 lots of 7 minutes. First 7 minutes about who the individual is, challenges in their sector, and the final 7 minutes about a progressive future. Next slide, please. The series is hosted by Lord Michael Hastings of Scarisbrick, Bianca Miller-Cole, former apprentice, finalist, and host of several TV programs, and June Sarpong, currently BBC's Director of Creativity. Next slide, please. We're pleased to announce that we have wonderful guests participating in the series, including Andrew Bailey, Governor of the Bank of England, Vinod Kumar, CEO of Vodafone, Alana Weston, Chairman of Selfridges, Magnus Dejaba, Global President of Saatchi & Saatchi, and Joe Ellison, Editor-in-Chief of How to Spend It. Next slide, please. The series itself starts with an extraordinary story. It's a tale of a relationship that endured for 23 years between Christo Brand and the man that would become the first Black president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela. When they first met, Christo Brand was responsible for, he was the warden, effectively the jailer of Nelson Mandela, and over that 23-year period they became best friends, eventually became a mentee, and that relationship grew when Nelson Mandela became president. So that's an extraordinary tale, and he shares how on one occasion he smuggled one of Nelson Mandela's grandchildren into prison. You have to remember, Nelson Mandela was locked up for 27 years. And so he was desperately missing his children. So that's just one of the many guests. Next slide, please. Other guests include Kevin Fenton, who often flanks the Prime Minister during the COVID-19 updates, Patrick Hutchinson, GQ's Humanitarian of the Year, the BLM protester that rescued the anti-BLM protester, Tommy Hilfiger, who needs no sort of mentioning, or right across to Sir William Waldegrave, chairman of the Coutts Private Bank. So we have an extraordinary lineup of guests, and obviously once we launch, which is going to be the series is due to be launched around about the 2nd week of August, we encourage everyone to really tune in. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And that's it. So in closing, COVID-19 and the killing of George Floyd has really shone a spotlight on social injustice, certainly along racial lines and other lines. And it's created a really unusual opportunity where there's an alignment of different interest groups all coming together. And we see this as a moment for allyship, where different racial groups and gender groups can come together and really use this window of opportunity to drive change and social transformation. So that's it, really. Thank you.
Darren, thank you very much indeed for that. Much appreciated. If you have any questions that you want to put to Darren, he will be around to answer those questions. We need you to put them into the chat box, and then we'll be dealing with them in a few minutes' time. But before we turn to those questions, let's cross over now and hear from Luciana Magliocco, Associate Director of Marketing at New West End Company. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Martin, and good afternoon all. Now, I am conscious that it is almost 5 o'clock on the first day of good weather we've had all week, so I promise to try and not keep you for too long. But I really did want to take the opportunity today to give members and partners an overview of the new and really exciting pop-up programme that we have launched in partnership with colleagues at Westminster City Council and the Crown Estate. First slide, please, Izzy. This pop-up programme is the very first of its kind in the West End and has been set up to address the immediate issue of empty voids across the district by trying to activate these spaces with innovative concepts and unique interactive experiences. The programme will seek to encourage customers back into our district by creating new reasons to visit and to rediscover the area, but also to create an ecosystem where new ideas and business models for a better future are tested. We launched the official competition last month, inviting homegrown talent, entrepreneurs and small-scale businesses to pitch for the opportunity to set up shop in our iconic district. And we have been absolutely blown away by the calibre of applications received, and they're truly inspiring and innovative proposals. The competition has also already generated lots of positive media coverage, which has really helped to highlight our commitment as a destination to evolve and adapt to external environmental changes and customer behaviours, so that we do continue to remain relevant and desirable to future visitors and investors. Next slide, please, Izzy. So, what type of content can you expect to see as part of this scheme? Well, we have identified the following 4 categories, which we hope will be brought to life in the coming months for local workers, Londoners, and of course, visitors alike to enjoy. The first will be retail laboratories. The second will be dreamscape rooms. The third will be mixed reality spaces. And the fourth will be wellness spaces. And I'm just going to give a really top line overview of each of these categories, and we will of course circulate this presentation afterwards. Next slide, please, Izzy. So starting with retail laboratories. These spaces are intended to provide a new generation of designers the opportunity to reimagine retail and challenge the way we consume fashion by providing products, services and experience that support the circular economy. These pop-ups will launch in September as part of Oxford Street's Showcase Month, which will see us educate and inform customers of the steps we are taking as both brands and a destination to drive more positive change. Next slide, please, Izzy. The Dreamscape rooms will seek to provide customers with fun, interactive spaces and a sense of escapism, which I think we've all been longing for after being trapped in our homes for the last 12 months. So this is just really a fun initiative. It will also act as the perfect background for user-generated content, because we do appreciate that with our offering, we really need to be giving visitors an opportunity to take that perfect selfie moment and to become advocates of the West End so that their friends and family can come and enjoy the space for themselves. So the concept here is to really create hybrid spaces that act as 50% a gallery and the other 50% a shop. So it really gives visitors an opportunity to experience the space and also take a piece of it home with them as well. Next slide, please, Izzy. Thank you. The aim of the mixed reality category is to turn empty units into immersive and responsive environments where we can really work with technology to enable audiences to connect on both a physical and emotional level. And we see this done incredibly well in Asia, and we really want to take that to the West End. You know, you can just see people booking their trips from Manchester and Liverpool down to the West End to engage in these incredible experiences. Next slide, please, Izzy. And finally, health and wellness spaces, which we know, again, like escapism, are more important than ever before. And so these spaces are intended to offer activities and exercises that help audiences improve their fitness, health and mindfulness by holding daily events, activities and workshops. And, you know, we can see a lot of our brands such as Selfridges, Lululemons, Nike Town, they're already doing this to a really high level, and we want to create more of these spaces within the West End. And I think these will resonate particularly well with local workers as we look to welcome them back in the coming months. Next slide, please. And finally, here is a snapshot of the opportunity that's available for both those occupiers that we will be reaching out to through the competition, and also the landlords that we hope to work with to bring these concepts and these brands to life. So just some important information here. The competition has now closed, and we hope to be selecting the successful applicants in the next few weeks, and we will be launching that with a full PR story and marketing materials on our destination websites. Whilst the programme will run until September, there's a maximum period of 3 months for the occupiers. Westminster City Council have pulled together an incredibly generous package, and so occupiers have the opportunity to avail of their Showcasing Enterprise Arts and Cultural Fund of up to £7,500. They will also be provided by a complete white box fit out service, and they will be able to avail of business rate reliefs. From a landlord perspective, what we're looking for are short-term standardised leases. We're looking for a rent-free period, and of course, in return, we would look to provide, or shall I say, Westminster City Council will look to provide reduced business rates for these landlords. We are looking for utility costs and service charges to be included, and flexibility to make non-structural changes. But we do promise to hand back your premises in exactly the same condition as it was so graciously given to us, and we will be securing a deposit fee, so that you can be rest assured on that security. So that's it in a nutshell. I think I did that in 10 minutes, so hopefully you get a few minutes back of the day. But now over to Martin again for Q&As.
We've got a special prize for you for squeezing it all in so perfectly. Thank you for that, Luciana. We've got quite a few questions coming in for Darren. It's not too late if you want to put a question to him. You can enter that in the chat box now. But let's bring you in, Darren, and remember to unmute your mic. This person is anonymous, but they say, appreciate this isn't about entrepreneurship, but what would you say is the most difficult part of implementing a diversity and inclusion program in an existing business model? Any views on that?
The most difficult, I mean, obviously it's going to vary from business to business, but I think it's really to have a clearer agenda, a criteria for what one's trying to achieve. And then once that's established, it's really to sit down with key members of staff and look at get the feedback, tune the strategy, and then talk about implementation. I think that's the best advice I could offer without knowing the specifics of the business.
Good advice. Does BBI partner with businesses and stakeholders? In what ways can we get involved and support?
Indeed, we are looking for support from various businesses. We have a number of initiatives. I've spoken about the educational initiative and the podcast, which has been supported by the Financial Times. We are looking for other initiatives as well. We are very keen on entrepreneurial initiatives, whether that's pathways, where we're giving access to members of the Black community to industries where there's low representation, or whether there's a space that we could use or partner on and find a way to create some sort of connection with the Black community, whether it's an opportunity or bring in business. I think sometimes people they're not always cognizant of the fact that the Black community spends collectively 300 billion every year, and there's another 24 billion untapped. And so for the right kind of business activity, the right kind of marketing, there's a huge opportunity, and BBI want to help to bring those benefits to some of the retailers.
Do you do any central government lobbying and advocacy through BBI?
Not at this stage. We are certainly non-political, but we are working on a strategy where we do have the support of the GLA, and that will be announced in the not too distant future.
There's a question here about neurodiversity, as well as diversity in terms of ethnicity and gender. Is that something that you cover or not?
No, we're quite narrow. I mean, there's lots of established organisations dealing with diversity in some of those other areas. Our focus is really around racial diversity.
Question here, someone's very enthusiastic about your podcast, says it sounds amazing. How can we listen? Is it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify?
It will be, yes. It will be on Apple, it will be on Spotify and other sort of popular platforms.
Excellent. This is actually a question for Luciana. I think we'll probably be going back to you in a second, Darren, but Luciana, if you can ready your microphone, when will we see this first pop-up opening?
Yes, Martin. So we are holding the pitches for the shortlisted candidates as of next week, and we hope to then announce them in July. I think realistically we'd be looking at a couple in the summertime and then looking towards September for those sustainably focused brands to launch as part of our showcase month. So July all the way through to October.
And forgive me if you covered this. But the next question is asking about locations. Do you have locations confirmed for the pop-ups, even which streets they're going to be in? Can you give us a bit of a reminder or a guide of where?
Absolutely, very good question, and I think I omitted that very vital part of information. As mentioned, we are working with the Crown Estate, so it will cover Regent Street. It will also cover the Oxford Street district and the Mayfair district. So we're currently in conversations with landlords across Mayfair and Oxford Street to locate those properties. We have identified 10 locations, and so we really do hope to bring 10 locations to life by the end of the occupier period.
Okay, this question I think might be more of a Jace question. So Jace, if you can ready yourself to address this one. Do the pop-up occupiers have to pay business rates, or does the relief still apply to them?
Good question. Thanks, Martin. So there are some discretionary rates the council is offering through the pop-up programme. It's not 100% zero rates, but they're certainly very attractive terms. And I think if anyone would like to talk about that, Luciana can follow up and connect you with Westminster on that. On just a more broader point on business rates, we know it's a big issue for West End businesses, and we've been campaigning with a lot of partners, CBI and BRC and BPF on this for years. The fundamental reform, we should have an update in the autumn by the Chancellor. What we're advocating very strongly for is with the revaluation happening now, which we think London, particularly the West End, is going to drop quite a lot, that all of us feel that benefit in 2023 when the new rates come into play. So I'm sure that's a webinar and its entire topic on its own, Martin, but I think just to give an update to members and partners on the call, it's a top priority, in particular the short run, that businesses feel the full benefits of the transition and the new rating valuations that will be coming in 2023.
There was another question here, an update on further support with business rates for existing businesses, especially with the extension of step 3 restrictions in mind. I think you really addressed all of that just now, or is there anything that you want to pick up with that specific question?
I think in the short run, they won't be looking any further on rate support. I think it is coming back in. And one thing we've made to the point to the government is in central London, that cap of 2 million doesn't go very far at all because the value of the properties is so high. And if you're a business operating nationally, which many of the West End businesses are, again, there's a cap. So these points are being made by us and other colleagues. But I think the big push for us at the moment is the revaluation and the transition. And I think we'll definitely come back to this topic with another webinar sort of in the summer, Martin.
Question here about Sunday trading, Jace. Are you still lobbying for regulation changes on that?
Absolutely, and for colleagues that aren't up to speed on that, we've been calling for the international centres, so the West End and Knightsbridge, to have this exemption. And it's actually not just about now, because obviously there is demand on Sundays, and actually they're picking up But we think as international tourists come back, particularly our Far East and Middle East that want to shop later in the evening, there's definitely a case for it, and there's definitely demand to shop later. And in fact, our MP, Nikki Aitken, was with the Chancellor this morning, and she raised it with Rishi, which is good news. And she spoke about it in the House yesterday. So watch this space. We certainly haven't given up with our partners in Knightsbridge on pushing for some more flexibility for our customers to shop later on Sundays in the future.
Okay, thanks for that. Couple of questions for Luciana, and then I'm going to go back to one last question with Darren. So Luciana first. The question here is what's the eligibility criteria? How many companies are you seeking? Didn't you say that you'd close that now? And that, so, you know, the eligibility criteria was kind of something that mattered before, but not now. Am I right? I can see you nodding out of the corner of my eye.
Yes, you are correct, Martin. The competition has now unfortunately closed, but all eligibility criteria was stated on the Westminster City Council link for the competition. So if colleagues and members are interested in seeing that, we can circulate that link, but it has unfortunately closed already.
Question here is, well, are you offering any educational support for companies setting up their pop-ups?
So the type of applicants that we've had come through are already established entrepreneurs and small startup organisations and local talent that have an online presence. And in fact, this opportunity is so lucrative for them because they've never had a bricks and mortar space. And so from an educational perspective, we actually don't need to step in because they're already doing it very well. But we will have a space provider, a space operator that will help provide that seamless transition into their first physical store.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. Let's bring Darren in for one last question since he was our main speaker today. Darren, I know you focus on the UK, but are you partnered with any equality charities or enterprises internationally?
Not yet, but one of the program we intend to launch towards the back end of this year, perhaps around about November. It is scalable. It's transferable, and we are in early talks with other retail partners outside of the UK. But it's still relatively early for BBI, and some of the points you've mentioned, it's in our plan, and as we roll forward, we'll start to put some of those initiatives in place as well to widen the reach of BBI.
Darren, thank you very much indeed for your address today and for answering all the questions, and thank you for Luciana as well, and for all of you that joined and asked questions. West End Recovery will be taking a short break over the summer, but we'll be back in the autumn with more inspiring speakers to offer stimulating and engaging information and ideas to inspire the reinvigoration and the recovery of the West End. Stay safe. We wish you all a lovely summer. Until we see you again, goodbye.